Imagine waking up one morning to find your favorite phone is no longer in production. Not because of a tech shortage, but because the factory that makes its brain, the semiconductor, was bombed overnight. Gas prices skyrocket, stock markets collapse, your savings shrink, companies close, global trade stalls. And the cause? Not a pandemic, not a banking crisis, but a war over a small island 100 miles off China's coast, Taiwan. Could a war between China and Taiwan really crash the global economy? Would it be the spark that lights the fuse of the next global recession? Let's unpack what might be the most dangerous economic domino in modern history. The powder keg in the Pacific. Just 81 miles. That's the distance between Taiwan and mainland China, roughly the same as New York to Philly. But this narrow strait might be the most dangerous body of water on the planet today. Why? Because it separates not just two governments, but two visions of what the future should look like. China views Taiwan as a rogue province that must return to the fold, by force if necessary. Taiwan, under President Lai Ching-te, increasingly asserts its independence, its democracy, and its global importance. The island has its own government, military, economy, and elections. In short, it's a country in all but name. And that's what Beijing refuses to accept. Tensions reached a new high on March 31, 2025, when China conducted its most aggressive military drills around Taiwan since the 2022 Pelosi visit. Warships surrounded the island. Fighter jets breached Taiwan's air defense zone. It was a warning and perhaps a rehearsal. But this isn't just a standoff between two neighbors. It's a showdown that pulls in the United States, Japan, Australia, and possibly the entire global order. The US is bound by the Taiwan Relations Act to provide Taiwan with the means to defend itself. If shots are fired, Washington might respond, and the Pacific becomes the world's most dangerous war zone. And yet, the real damage won't just be seen on a battlefield. It will be felt in factories, stock markets, grocery stores, and gas pumps across the globe. Because Taiwan isn't just a political pawn, it's an economic keystone. Taiwan's chip dominance. Taiwan may not occupy much space on a map, but it sits at the center of modern civilization. How? Through its dominance in semiconductors, those tiny chips that power nearly every device and system you rely on. Smartphones, electric vehicles, medical equipment, fighter jets, artificial intelligence supercomputers, even your washing machine, all run on chips. And Taiwan produces over 90% of the world's most advanced ones. At the heart of this chip empire is TSMC, Taiwan's Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. It's not just the largest contract chip maker in the world, it's the only facility capable of mass-producing the most advanced logic chips used in everything from Apple iPhones to NVIDIA's AI chips to the guidance systems of F-35 fighter jets. In other words, if TSMC stops, the world stops. And that's the nightmare scenario if war breaks out. Unlike oil, you can't stockpile chips indefinitely. The moment Taiwan's fabs go offline, whether due to missile strikes, cyber attacks, or a military blockade, the ripple effects would be instantaneous. Car assembly lines would stall. Tech companies would delay releases. Military operations could be hindered. Prices would surge and supply chains would unravel on a level worse than what we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic. But rebuilding that capacity elsewhere isn't easy. It takes years, billions of dollars, and a level of engineering talent that isn't easily replicated. That's why Taiwan isn't just important to Asia. It's the silicon shield of the world, and if it falls, it could take the global economy down with it. China's fragile economic web. Now let's flip the lens to China. At first glance, China looks unstoppable. The world's second largest economy, massive infrastructure, and a booming consumer base. But beneath the surface lies fragility. China is deeply dependent on exports. A war that triggers US and G7 sanctions would gut its trade volume. Multinational companies, already skittish, would accelerate their shift to countries like India, Vietnam, and Mexico. The yuan would plummet, capital flight would skyrocket, Beijing would likely slap on capital controls, further spooking investors. And don't forget China's biggest economic balloon, real estate, a sector already teetering on collapse. Add the uncertainty of war, and you've got a formula for mass unemployment, falling consumer confidence, and political unrest. China's dream of becoming a tech superpower? Gone, along with its access to foreign chip-making equipment and design software, most of which comes from US-aligned nations. Energy choke points and global shockwaves. War isn't just about weapons, it's about fuel. And China is not energy independent. It imports over 70% of its oil and natural gas. Much of it flows through the South China Sea and the Strait of Malacca. Guess who dominates those waters? United States and allied navies. In a war scenario, China's fuel supply could be choked overnight. Blackouts, halted factories, and energy rationing would follow. But here's the twist. This wouldn't just affect China. About 60% of global maritime trade passes through the South China Sea. If conflict shuts down this artery, it would send oil prices soaring, shipping insurance through the roof, and global trade into chaos. Think of it like blocking the Panama Canal, but on a scale 5 times bigger, the global chain reaction. A China-Taiwan war wouldn't stay regional. It would hit everyone. Taiwan is the 16th largest economy in the world, doing close to $1 trillion in annual trade. Much of that would vanish in a blockade or bombing campaign. A recent Rhodium Group study estimates a year-long conflict could wipe out $1.6 trillion in chip revenue alone. But that's just the start. Major US and Japanese companies would face asset seizures. Wall Street would nosedive. Global markets would panic. Inflation would spike due to supply shortages, again, but worse than in 2020. Meanwhile, China's GDP could shrink by up to 35%. The US up to 10%. That's not recession. That's depression territory. Debt, demographics, and deterrence. Some argue war could rally nationalism and spur wartime spending. But modern economies are not built like World War II-era factories. China's just-in-time production model can't just flip to war mode. Supply chains stretch across oceans. Raw materials come from unstable or rival territories. Chips, again, are its Achilles heel. Add to this China's aging population and shrinking workforce, and you've got a long-term economic time bomb. The United States and Japan, China's biggest potential adversaries, are also swimming in debt. A prolonged war would balloon defense budgets and rattle bond markets. Currencies could become volatile, interest rates unpredictable. Economies thrive on certainty. A Taiwan war would unleash nothing but chaos. The Red Cell warning. In the wake of 9/11, the CIA created a small but bold think tank called the Red Cell Project. Its mission? Challenge the comfortable narratives. Question assumptions. Break through the cognitive fog that can lead to catastrophe. One of the Red Cell's core insights is especially relevant when we examine how authoritarian regimes like China make decisions during times of crisis. In such systems, truth doesn't always rise to the top. Leaders often receive highly filtered intelligence. Bad news is buried. Failures are disguised, and success often exaggerated. The incentive to please superiors outweighs the incentive to be honest. It's a phenomenon not unique to China, but its scale and consequences there are particularly alarming. We've seen this before. During Mao Zedong's Great Leap Forward, inflated production numbers misled leadership into believing China was thriving. In reality, tens of millions starved. The feedback loop was poisoned by fear, obedience, and illusion. Fast forward to 2025, and history risks repeating itself, this time with far higher stakes. If Chinese military officials overestimate their readiness, or underestimate the strength of Taiwan's defense, or the speed of US retaliation, the consequences could spiral quickly. One wrong assumption, one misread radar, one political miscalculation, and the world could be plunged into a conflict that no one can walk back. That's the true terror. Not war itself, but a war launched on false confidence, and kept going by pride. In such a system, reality doesn't stop the war. Only collapse does. What happens if Taiwan falls? Let's fast forward into a grim alternate future. China launches a full-scale invasion and successfully takes control of Taiwan. It's a geopolitical and military victory, but the costs are catastrophic and the gains illusory. First, the economic lifeblood of Taiwan, its semiconductor industry, is wiped out. Either destroyed in the crossfire or made inoperable due to the flight of skilled engineers, the loss sends a devastating shock through the global economy. Taiwan produces over 90% of the world's advanced logic chips, components vital to everything from fighter jets and smartphones to hospitals and power grids. Without them, global supply chains would grind to a halt. But Taiwan's fall wouldn't just be Taiwan's loss. The US and its allies would react with crippling sanctions, trade freezes, and diplomatic isolation. China would become a financial pariah, much like Russia after its invasion of Ukraine, only on a far larger scale. Global corporations would pull out en masse. Capital flight would surge. China's access to international markets would evaporate. Meanwhile, the world scrambles to replace what was lost. Chip shortages would last for years, causing inflation, stalled innovation, and widespread product scarcity. Nations dependent on Taiwanese tech would enter recession. Some developing economies might collapse entirely. And what would China gain? An island in ruins, a destroyed economy, a reputation in tatters, a victory, perhaps on paper. But in practice, a Pyrrhic triumph that triggers the most devastating economic crisis since World War II and reshapes the world for decades to come. Pause or plunge? So, could a Taiwan war trigger the next global recession? Number, it would do far worse. It could be the economic equivalent of an asteroid strike. One decision, made in Beijing, could unravel decades of globalization, cooperation, and stability. That's why some analysts believe China may ultimately choose other tactics: cyber attacks, political pressure, economic coercion. Not out of mercy, but out of necessity. And for Washington, the rhetoric must cool, because every show of strength comes with economic consequences that voters aren't ready to pay. We often think of war in terms of battles and bombs, but in the 21st century, war is waged in stock markets, factories, and supply chains. A single spark over Taiwan could set the global economy ablaze. The question isn't just, can we afford a war? It's, can we afford the aftermath? If you found this video eye-opening, do us a favor. Smash that like button, subscribe for more deep dives, and hit the bell so you don't miss the stories behind the headlines. This isn't just global politics, it's your future.